Some people chant prayers to find peace of mind, but others chant to awaken the spirits that refuse to leave. In the world of ancient Pali incantations, there exists a scripture, not inscribed within temple walls, but etched into the karma of the one who dares to chant it. It is said that if one completes all 7 verses, they will witness their own spirit dying before their very eyes. Tonight, we shall open the forbidden scripture, the chanting scripture of the dead, the story of a young woman who chanted with a heart full of love, but instead summoned something that was never meant to return. Namo tassa bhagavato sama sambuddhassa. And this was the prayer, the final one of her life. We often pray to find the one we love, yet we forget to pray for our hearts to accept the loss. Rain drizzled softly upon the old wooden roof of a small house in Chiang Mai, Maysa. A woman in her late 20s sat before a pool of melting candles. Their trembling flames the only light in the room. She chanted softly, her voice barely above a whisper, as if afraid to awaken something that should remain asleep. Itipiso phahwa, arahang, samma samputo. But tonight, something was different. Her voice was no longer the only one in the room. Another voice began to chant, softly, almost from behind her. The same rhythm, the same tone, but cold, as if whispered from the other side of the world. Maysa stopped chanting at once. Her heart pounded violently. She turned around, but no one was there. Only the flickering candlelight remained, as if it were breathing. On Wa Lai Road, 3 days earlier, she had walked through the old market on Wa Lai Road, where an elderly monk Saturday, behind a wooden stall cluttered with decaying books. Among the pile lay one book completely black, its golden letters faded, barely visible under the dust. On its cover, written in faint letters, the chanting scripture of the dead. Maysa picked it up absent-mindedly. "Is this one for sale, venerable sir?" The old monk slowly lifted his gaze, his eyes clouded as though they had seen through time itself.
"This is not for sale, my child. It can only be passed on. If you wish to take it, you must ask your heart carefully to know for whom you intend to chant."
Maysa froze, her eyes reddened as the words, "for whom," echoed in her mind. A vision of her mother, who had passed away the year before, rose before her eyes like a shadow within the candle's flame. She raised her hands in respect and accepted the scripture without hesitation. The old monk spoke softly before handing it over. "You may chant up to 7 verses, but never complete them all. If your desire to see is stronger than your will to accept, this scripture will make you witness what no living soul should ever see." That night, Maysa returned home and opened the scripture slowly, her hands trembling just a little. The letters a mix of Khmer and Pali, written in faded red ink, like dried blood, soaked into the ancient paper. She took a deep breath and began to chant. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Ita me matika bahatisomphawe. The air in the room turned cold. The candle flame flickered, as if something unseen had just passed by. Her voice trembled, yet her longing for her mother kept her chanting. In her mind, she saw her mother alive again, laughing, cooking, humming softly in the kitchen. The candlelight flickered wildly. 2 shadows danced upon the wall, but she was completely alone. The next night, she opened the scripture and began to chant once more, but this time, there was a voice responding. It was a woman's voice, chanting just a little slower, as though following her every word. That voice was her mother's. "Mom, Mom, is that you?" Maysa cried out, her tears falling fast. Yet her hands kept chanting without pause. At the same time, a thin fog began to form upon the mirror, and in its reflection, it was no longer her, but a woman dressed in white, slowly smiling back. Every night after that, Maysa continued the chanting without pause. By the 3rd verse, the candle cracked a sharp pop, as if something inside it was struggling to escape. By the 4th, the cat in the house began to wail strangely, as if it could see what no human should. By the 5th, the air grew colder, unnaturally cold. Her breath turned to mist in the darkness. Then she began to dream of a coffin resting in the middle of her home, and inside lay her mother, motionless. But each time she leaned closer, her mother's face became her own. On the anniversary of her mother's death, she made a decision to complete the 7th verse, hoping she would finally see her mother again. Clearly, the old monk, who had once given her the scripture, warned her again when they met by chance at the market.
My child, some things never truly disappear. They only wait for us to accept that they're gone. Do not open the door for death to walk back in.
But Maysa did not listen. She began to chant, surrounded by 7 candles, arranged in a perfect circle around her. The scent of beeswax began to change into the stench of burning flesh, as if something unseen was smoldering in the dark. The sacred Pali verses broke and faltered, interwoven with her own ragged breaths. Sapphe satta maranathamma, tukkhaṃ aniccaṃ anatta. The flames began to shiver. A cold wind spiraled through the room, and a voice, her mother's voice, whispered back, word by word. It was exactly midnight. When Maysa finished the final verse, everything around her slowly faded into shades of gray. Above her, black smoke swirled and coiled, like gathering spirits forming a circle in the air. And then she saw her mother, standing at the foot of the bed, dressed in white, smiling softly, just as she did on the day she said goodbye. "Mom." Her voice trembled. Tears streamed down her face. But her mother said nothing. She simply reached out her hand, slowly. In her mother's hand was the same book, the chanting scripture of the dead. The pages lay open. At the very last line, the faded red letters, trembling in the candlelight, it read, "He who chants all 7 verses shall behold the image of his own final breath." And she saw it, her own body, lying still inside a coffin. And the 7 candles, extinguished, all at once. Several days later, the neighbors said, they saw candlelight flickering through Maysa's window, even though no one lived there anymore. When the authorities entered the house, they found only her body lying beside the scripture, her lips pale and still, yet frozen mid-chant. The old monk arrived at dawn. He saw the scripture resting beside her lifeless body. He burned it at once, while reciting only one final verse.
Safif Sata Sukhita Ontu. May all beings find peace.
But that night, after everyone had gone, the house fell into utter silence, and then a faint sound rose from beneath the floorboards. A voice, slow, cold, like the wind, sighing through a grave. Namo Tassa Bhagavato. The candles that had long been extinguished flickered back to life, one by one, and there the shadow of a woman, kneeling in the dark, chanting still, a shadow that no longer breathed. Love that clings becomes a chain between worlds. When the living cannot let go, the dead can never rest. There are whispers among the elder monks that the chanting scripture of the dead was carried away by the wind from the burning pyre. No one knows where it drifted or whose hands it found next. But if one night, while you are chanting, you hear a faint voice chanting back, do not stop, for that may be Maysa, still chanting the final verse. She never finished.